Greetings, esteemed viewers and loyal subscribers. You are on Ruslan Belov's channel, and today, as always, we proceed to a detailed study of the daily operational summary regarding the course of combat operations on the Ukrainian theatre of war. However, before moving to the analysis of the situation directly on the line of military contact, it is impossible to ignore the shocking events unfolding on the world stage. Let us ask the question: how is Donald Trump's widely advertised truce faring? The reality has turned out to be extremely far from pre-election promises and loud statements. Throughout the past day, the international community observed the Israeli armed forces launching massive strikes on Lebanese territory. The scale of the tragedy is staggering. In just one day, and effectively within a brief 12-hour window, the death toll reached 260 people, and this figure, unfortunately, tends to increase. The number of wounded and maimed as a result of these attacks exceeded 1,165 people. In parallel, an extremely tense situation persists in Iran. Loitering munitions strikes were recorded there, resulting in the death of a 7-year-old girl, while 6 other civilians sustained injuries of varying severity. Iran, in turn, did not remain in debt and initiated retaliatory actions, striking strategic targets in Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait. We are presented with a picture of a very specific truce that more closely resembles the beginning of a full-scale regional conflagration. But honestly speaking, could anything fundamentally different have been expected from Trump and his political team? From my point of view, absolutely not. It would be the height of naivety to assume that a party that has already reneged on its obligations and deceived its partners 3 times would behave differently a 4th time. What happened is another clear lesson, and it is extremely important for the Russian side to learn this lesson. It is necessary to clearly realize exactly who negotiations are being conducted with and what the real weight of these people's words is. As of today, it is obvious. Their promises are worth exactly as much as the paper they might have been written on: nothing. Nevertheless, despite the foreign policy chaos, combat operations on the front do not stop for a minute, and the analysis of the current situation continues scrupulously. General overview of the situation on the Ukrainian front. Friends, today's broadcast will be somewhat more concise compared to yesterday's. The reason is simple: the volume of incoming news directly from the front lines over the last hours was not so significant. To great regret, one has to state the absence of signs of any large-scale activation of combat operations at the moment. The rates of advancement of the Russian units are now comparable to the indicators of March, somewhere slightly higher, somewhere slightly lower, but in general, a stable, albeit not rapid, forward movement is observed. Zaporizhzhia direction and the Vostok grouping sector. The review was planned to start with the northern sectors, but it is necessary to first pay attention to the area of responsibility of the Vostok grouping. Yesterday, it was discussed in detail that the AFU command concentrated an unprecedented amount of its technical resources, up to 40% of all drone system units, in the Zaporizhzhia direction. But as it turns out, not only drone operators were brought here. The Ukrainian side concentrated huge masses of infantry here. According to conservative estimates, more than 20% of all AFU infantry reserves are currently located here, which is a very serious indicator. Such a density of troops led to logical consequences. Ukrainian units are increasingly falling under strikes, not in small groups of 2, but as entire formations. While on other sectors of the front, it is common to see one stormtrooper or a pair of soldiers trying to stealthily leak onto positions, here the AFU literally move in crowds. Yesterday, Russian UAV operators detected such a concentration of manpower in the area of the settlement of Velikomykhailivka. A group of Ukrainian infantrymen moved forward, attempting a march, but was noticed in time, after which a Russian drone successfully engaged them. It is obvious that the Ukrainian command completely disregards losses in manpower. Their main and only task is to prevent the Russian army's exit to Zaporizhzhia at any cost. And here it must be admitted that in a number of local areas, the Ukrainian side manages to achieve temporary success. Take, for example, the Andreevka area. Yesterday, objective control footage was published, capturing the destruction of an AFU pickup truck in the southern part of this village. The very fact that Ukrainian equipment can move freely in this zone indirectly confirms that control over the settlement has most likely been lost by the Russian side at the moment. There are also open questions regarding the neighboring Ostapovskoye. There is no clear data yet on whose control it is under. Now, if the AFU enter Andreevka without fear, it means the situation there is in Kiev's favor. In general, the situation remains extremely tense. The AFU continue attempts to attack, hoping to slow down the Russian movement towards Zaporizhzhia. However, there is confidence that they will not be stopped. Russian troops continue to advance to the west. Quite impressive figures of covered territories were discussed earlier. Moreover, as soon as the dense vegetation, the so-called Zelenka, appears, the pace of the Russian offensive will significantly increase. This is also understood by Ukrainian military analysts, in whose ranks panic is growing. In their reports, the situation on the sector of the offensive toward Orakov is characterized by very harsh terms. They openly admit that with the appearance of leaves, their position will become catastrophic, and at the moment they have no effective methods of countering this threat. Kharkiv direction, Vovchansk and environs. Moving on to other hotspots. In the Kharkiv region, in the Vovchansk sector, systematic work continues to clear forest areas. Yesterday, information arrived, confirmed by Ukrainian sources, that a Russian reconnaissance group of 2 people managed to reach the western outskirts of the settlement of Losevka. Of course, it is premature to talk about a full-fledged consolidation there. It was a classic reconnaissance in force. However, the very fact that Russian soldiers can pass through these forests unhindered indicates an extremely weak saturation of this sector by AFU forces. They simply do not have enough infantry to control this territory. Again, it is worth waiting for the Zelenka. Now the lack of foliage makes any movement in the forest extremely risky, as soldiers are visible from above. But in a couple of weeks, when the forest becomes impenetrable to simple observation, the Russian side will likely take Losevka seriously. As for the Vovchansk-Hutora area, there is practically no news. This place, like Vovchansk itself, has turned into a zone of extremely fierce and exhausting battles. The Ukrainian side tried to spread disinformation that in the Ambanoy area they supposedly managed to recapture part of the territory and reach almost close to Melivoy. This can be officially called complete nonsense. In reality, an unsuccessful sortie of several Ukrainian stormtroopers took place. They wandered onto Russian positions and were immediately eliminated. Kupiansk and Luhansk sectors. In the Kupiansk area, encouraging news is arriving. The Russian army continues to advance and consolidate in the western quarters of the city. Despite the fact that individual groups of AFU soldiers are still holding positions there, they are gradually losing them. It can be stated that the ambitious attempt of Ukraine to hold Kupiansk at any cost has failed. Kiev threw colossal resources and a huge amount of infantry into this direction, but judging by everything, their reserves in this sector are exhausted, and the desired result was not achieved. From Kurilovka yesterday, objective control footage was received confirming the presence and control of Russian units in the central part of the settlement. Nevertheless, the old problem remains here. The Kurilovka 1 micro-district, built up with multi-story buildings. AFU soldiers continue to hold out there. Although ground supply routes for them are completely cut, they have established logistics with the help of drones, birds, which allows them to maintain a certain degree of combat capability. Knocking them out of this fortress has not yet been successful for the Russian side, but work in this direction is being conducted constantly. On the Borovoy direction, the situation remains stable and quiet, with no significant changes occurring over the day. Also, many asked about the status of the Luhansk region. Is it completely cleared? Looking at the current map, it is clear. For 100% control, the Russian side needs to liberate about 1.5 villages and clear a little more than 30 square kilometers of territory. Once this is done, it will be possible to officially declare the full liberation of the LPR. Chasiv Yar and Constantinovka directions. The Lyman and Slavyansk sectors have brought no news over the past 24 hours, but long-awaited reports of activation came from the Chasiv Yar sector. While there is no exact information on the depth of advancement in meters yet, it is known that powerful pressure has begun on Verolyubivka. This is a critically important moment. The complete clearing of Verolyubivka and the subsequent exit to the Klinovoye area will significantly worsen and eventually destroy the AFU logistics chain from Druzhkivka to Kostiantynivka. Currently, their logistics are already in a deplorable state, and this maneuver will make them virtually impossible. This will immediately affect the intensity of the battles within Kostiantynivka itself. Also, pressure has begun in the Mykolaiivka area. Although, for now, the outlook is cautiously pessimistic, given that the Russian army has been fighting for these fortifications for more than 8 months without decisive success. But perhaps right now the turning point has come when the AFU defense will be broken. In Kostiantynivka itself, urban battles continue. Fighting is taking place both in the industrial zone and in residential quarters. The AFU tried to change the course of the battles and jump into Berezovsk. They managed to enter, but they remained there as casualties. Russian soldiers held the village. It is under full Russian control. This information was additionally verified. Berezovsk is under firm Russian control. Also, it is worth cautiously hinting that some Russian successes on the Dobropilya direction should soon become known, so stay tuned for another update with good news. Massive strikes on Ukraine's infrastructure. Meanwhile, the Russian armed forces continue to methodically destroy the military and industrial infrastructure of the Ukrainian side. Strikes were struck against targets in 6 key regions of Ukraine. In the Odessa region, 2 series of powerful explosions were recorded in the Izmail area. Port and repair infrastructure were attacked. There were also reports of a hit on a vessel with fuel, on board of which a powerful fire broke out. In the Kharkiv region, about 10 explosions occurred at an oil depot in Marefa. Also in the Kharkiv region, a pumping station of one of the Ukhnafta gas fields was attacked. In the Sumy region, a locomotive depot was hit. In Veliki Burluk, a substation was severely damaged. A strike on the rear infrastructure of the AFU in the Chernihiv region resulted in the destruction of key equipment of the logistics chain. Geopolitical crisis, Iran, Israel, and the collapse of American diplomacy. Returning to the international agenda, it should be noted that the truce between the US and Iran, advertised by Trump, ended without really having time to begin. American and Israeli forces, according to press TV reports, violated the truce by attacking an oil refinery in southern Iran. In violation of the ceasefire regime, American-Israeli forces struck the Lavan refinery. A series of explosions thundered, according to the Iranian TV channel. Fire crews are working in the area. A monstrous slaughter is also taking place in Lebanon. Israel is conducting Operation Eternal Darkness, leveling cities to the ground. Massive Israeli attacks on Lebanon are reported. Residential areas of Beirut are under fire. The Israeli army reports that in 10 minutes, about 100 objects were attacked in Beirut, the Bekaa Valley, and southern Lebanon. Part of the targets were in residential areas. Earlier, Israel stated that they do not intend to stop fire in Lebanon, despite the truce with Iran. Israel stated that this is a targeted, large-scale operation aimed allegedly at all Hezbollah command centers to crush the militarized movement. Premier Netanyahu stated that Lebanon does not fall under the 2-week ceasefire agreement with Iran, and the IDF will continue attacks. In response, Iran suspended the passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz and will withdraw from the ceasefire agreement if strikes on Lebanon continue, writes Tasnim. Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi officially stated to Pakistani mediators, Tehran is considering the violation of the ceasefire in Iran and Lebanon and will provide an answer. In Iran, they are increasingly leaning toward the conclusion that if Israel continues attacks, despite the reached agreements at all levels, this indicates that Washington has lost leverage over Netanyahu and cannot restrain his actions. The situation was exacerbated by an attack on a critically important oil pipeline in Saudi Arabia, east-west, which provided oil exports bypassing the Strait of Hormuz. This strike threatens the energy security of the entire region. Military experts, including Yuri Podolyaka, note the strange duality of peace initiatives. Documents presented to different parties contain different points. It is likely that Trump is trying to manipulate conditions, offering Iran recognition of the right to enrich uranium in one version of the document and hiding this fact in another. Such duplicity only adds fuel to the fire. Political chaos. inside the US and the future of the American presence in Europe. Meanwhile, inside the United States itself, a serious political struggle is flaring up. Democrats in Congress have officially called for the activation of the 25th Amendment to the Constitution, which allows for the removal of the president from power by declaring him incapacitated. The pretext was Trump's aggressive threats against Iran and his orders to strike civilian targets. Democrats intend to use this as a basis for impeachment, portraying Trump as an unbalanced militarist. On the surface, details are emerging about how the decision on this military adventure was made. It turned out that the Israeli lobby played a key role, convincing Trump of the possibility of a rapid regime change in Tehran. At the same time, professionals such as CIA Director Ratcliffe and Secretary of State Rubio skeptically assessed these plans, and Vice President Vance opposed them altogether. Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth found himself at the center of a scandal due to chaos in the department and the dismissal of dissenting generals. It is obvious that the adventure in Iran could be the political end for many figures of the Republican Party. Against the background of this chaos, the US is considering the possibility of withdrawing its troops from those European countries that refuse to support the Iranian campaign. The list of defaulters includes Bulgaria, Hungary, and Slovakia. Washington has already notified its allies of a reduction in the contingent in Romania. The Pentagon is trying to shift its focus to Asia and Latin America, which is drawing sharp criticism from Republicans like Senator Roger Wicker. They believe that leaving Europe in the midst of the Ukrainian crisis sends the wrong signal to Vladimir Putin. It is obvious that Trump is losing interest in supporting Kyiv. Delays in weapon deliveries, the refusal to provide Tomahawk missiles, and a change in rhetoric, all this testifies to Washington's desire to shift the financial burden of the conflict onto the shoulders of the European Union. In conditions of an internal lockdown and a lack of funds, the American administration strives for optimization, replacing full-fledged military bases with a network of weapons depots in Poland and the Baltic states. This will allow for the rapid redeployment of troops if necessary, without spending huge sums on the permanent maintenance of garrisons. Conclusion. Summarizing, it can be said that the world stands on the threshold of global upheavals, and the situation on the front remains stably difficult, but with a clear advantage for the Russian army in key sectors. We continue to closely monitor the development of events, both on the front line and in the high offices of world politics. Thank you for staying with us. Subscribe to Ruslan Belov's channel so as not to miss important news. Peace, resilience, and goodness to everyone. Until we meet again on the air.